Good evening, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. I got the expert in lumber with me today. I got Keta from Madison's Lumber Reporter. Thank you so much, Keta, for joining me this evening to have a conversation about the lumber industry.
No worries. Can't wait to talk more about all the juicy stuff that's been happening since our last time that we did this in December.
Yeah, it was just a couple of months ago. So those who are new to Madison's Lumber Reporter, can you just kind of give us a brief idea of what Madison Lumber Reporter is and what you do?
Sure thing. And so it's a price guide for industry, a newsletter that goes out to um, the sawmills or the large buyers all across North America since 1952. We track 500 individual softwood lumber and panel commodity prices every Friday. I'm the third owner. And so when I talk about what's happening with the market and the prices, I'm talking about FOB mill gate prices just for the wood. It doesn't include all of the additional, like the commission or freight or the duty or anything like that. All of the dimension lumber prices are US dollars per thousand board feet. And the panel, like the plywood and OSB prices, are Canadian dollars per thousand square feet.
Nice. So, just to kind of give it a kind of a brief idea. So basically, you just call around to all the manufacturers and pretty much the kind of like the bigger suppliers of lumber and get an idea of what everybody's charging and compile that into a report that you put out every Friday. Right?
That's right. I have an analyst who does the market survey. And so we do that on Thursdays. I actually just got the data for today. And then we process it and put it into, it used to be a PDF newsletter that would go out, but now it's a fancy dashboard people log into, and they can manipulate and look at different graphs and see prices compared to each other and see prices compared to historical. And so we do that every week on Thursday, and then it's sort of like published on Friday. So it's a weekly update that is supported by the industry because, as you said, we get the data from the mills in the different regions for the different products, like stud mills or boards and all the different commodities. And we also call the resellers, the large stocking wholesalers, to find out what they're paying. And then we use the information about what's going on with the mills, like their order file or their inventory or their log supply, transportation, weather, labor, all that kind of stuff, to get the price that then goes out to industry and then everyone else who's interested, like the retailers or banks, government, universities, stuff like that.
So everybody can kind of get a good idea of what's going on with the lumber industry pretty much across the entire region when it comes to, United States and up into Canada as well. So very, very good report. This is really critical information for a lot of people who are looking to be in the building industry, whether they're going to build a house, build houses, or, just be in the new construction game. Understanding where lumber prices are, where they're headed, where they've been. This is really critical information for the builders out there. Now, we have gone through a wild, wild ride on lumber over the last couple of years. And I mean, we don't need to go back through all the data, but kind of more like let's talk about what's going on right now. We talked back in December, prices had started to fall. They kind of reached a bottom and then started shooting up again, but here they are coming back down. So what's happened over the last 2 months? What's going on?
Right. And so in a large way, that's normal seasonal, like toward the end of every year, as winter comes on and not a lot of home builders want to break ground on a new house in December or January. So that's a normal slowdown. And it's the normal time of year where sort of things get wrapped up, where because the construction activity is slowing down, the lumber sales are slowing down. So the mills slow down, they take their curtailments and their downtime, do their maintenance. It's a fiscal thing for the sawmills that they want to empty out their lumber yard of manufactured wood at the end of the year so that they don't have a tax implication of carrying forward stock into the next year. And they want to load up their log yard so they've made the investment in their feedstock for the coming year. So the normal seasonal cycle is to slow down. Last year, it was magnified because the mortgage rates were increasing, and we knew that they were increasing. There was a lot of warnings that the interest rates were going to go up. And so the mills were ready. And having such a hot couple of years before that, they did need to take some maintenance and do the curtailments just for their equipment, upgrades, all that kind of stuff that normally happens when things are slower, the demand did dip more even than the curtailments and the downtime that usually take place. And so that there were quite a few mills that took even more production offline in November and December and even into January of this year. And that was in order to prevent the price from dropping even further. We have a big change compared to the previous 10 years, like before 2020. The cost of production has essentially doubled. So where a lot of people got used to the sawmill price of that benchmark Western spruce 2x4 that I talk about all the time, being somewhere between like $250 and $300 per thousand, is now in British Columbia, the very large supplying basket for North America, the cost of production is coming up to like $500. So that's why I say this is the new normal, and don't keep asking when's the price going to get back down. It's not going to get back down because that's like they're losing way too much money, right? We don't know where the new normal is. I'm saying it's going to be somewhere between 500 and 700 as we get into the seasonal, because it usually throughout the year goes up and down by like $150. So quite the low point actually was $373 on that Western spruce 2x4. So that's, the mills are taking quite a loss, and they kept their downtime. They extended their curtailments so that they're trying to keep the manufacturing volumes in line with demand. And then we, like you said, we had a bit of an increase there. And then now this week, I just got my numbers for tomorrow, and the price is back down. So my idea is that we've got such an extended winter happening that the construction activity, like when you talk about the builders, right, we're not really talking about the small contractors or even the medium-sized contractors. It is the large US home building companies that really set the price. They come in early in the year and make their volume purchases for their expected, like the tracts of hundreds of homes that they're going to be doing in the spring, because they like to have the wood that they need on the ground before their construction activity starts. So they're ordering like January, February, March for April, May, June. And that's where the large volume of sales goes into, whether it's a Canadian or a US mill. And so that's where the price level is set. And then everybody else comes after. The retailers sort of have to take that, whatever that price level has been set at, and definitely the smaller volume buyers, they can only get what already was determined between, you know, the mills and the large home builders.
Yeah. And so like what we have experienced here over the last couple of months is not a lot of demand, right? And the mills kind of going into this curtailment, whether it's for maintenance purposes or just seasonality, where it's putting kind of a position of tighter lumber out there, right? There's less inventory taking place. But then the home demand is also, or the new construction starts, at least, has been down comparatively to what we had experienced, you know, over the last couple of years. So this has kind of put us in a situation. If the home building pop, like if all of a sudden, like for some reason, like say the Fed does something like really weird and actually lowers interest rates, that could create a situation where the demand for this lumber comes up. Is there enough like lumber in the system to handle like an increase in demand, like a significant one? Or are we like, would that like really trigger another like price increase event that we had?
Right. And so that's a really good question.
Very speculative, I understand that, but you know.
No, but I can speak to that actually. So the first thing is, when those prices in the past 2 years went to those incredible highs that nobody ever saw before, there was not a lot of volume of wood sold. Okay. So where some people might be like, oh, this is gouging or they're, you know, collusion or something. But the thing is that a sawmill would rather sell 40 rail cars at $800 than 4 rail cars at $1,600. Okay. And so the calculation of keeping supply in line with demand to make enough so that you don't have that incredible volatility, because that just blew everybody, right? Like when like I said, normally throughout the year, a price of any wood might go up by $150 as a season. If it goes up by $1,000 in 4 weeks, nobody is ready for that. Okay.
Right.
So right now, that's what I mean about, it's not just how much lumber are they making to have in the yard to sell. It's about how ready are they to come back with their log supply. So what I'm going to say is log supply is good. There's not been any impediment on getting harvesting the trees. So that ability to respond is there. The other thing that's really important as like a metric to understand what's happening with the mills is called the order file. So the sawmill order file, that means if someone calls to make to order some wood, how long does it take before that gets put on the production line? And during the downtime of November, December, early January, an order file might be 3 days or prompt. Like they might put that wood on the line today. And then when times are good, like February, March, and it's a year where housing is strong, an order file might be 5 weeks. Okay, and so if an order file is 5 weeks, prices are going up. A customer can't make counter offers to bring the price down because the guy's just going to be, why would I lower the price? And the reverse is true when there's almost no order file. The customer negotiating has a lot of ability to counter offer to get the price lower for the wood that they want during the slow time of the year. So the mills that have taken capacity offline are trying to plan so that when they need to come back, they have the feedstock to respond quickly. But that hasn't happened yet. So we're not in that right now. And when you mentioned about the housing, the month-over-month data is showing a drop, but actually full year 2022 total housing starts were almost flat compared to full year 2021. So there was only 3% less total housing starts in the US last year compared to the year before. There was 10% less single family. So single family is the largest component of home building and uses the most wood. So that's the one that the mills are looking at. So while things are down, they're not in a catastrophe, right? And the mills needed to respond to the market conditions with the hopeful view that it's short term and that they can come back online coming in the spring when things do start heating up again.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That, like, because this is really where a lot of people get confused. Like they just think like, well, there's a shortage. The mills can just make up lumber. It's not like that. There's a lot that goes into the system, and trying to understand where it is that this volume needs to be. I mean, when the mill only has their order files really to look at, like how far out can they make these deliveries and how close it is. This is really where like that price starts to get set, right? I mean, if it's out there 5 weeks, yeah, there you're like you're saying, like, why would I adjust my prices? It's fine. But if I have to deliver or I can deliver today, that makes the demand or the capabilities of the buyer saying, hey, I don't really like your price. I'm going to go to this other guy, right? Because I don't have to wait 5 weeks. Yeah, prices start to drop immediately. Before we move off of the prices, though, I just kind of wanted to kind of give the audience a little bit of an idea, because we talked about that price move, 150 per thousand, right? A move, if that was to take place, like say prior to all the COVID, like say prior to 2018, $150 move inside of a year would have been extreme, right? But
no, that would be like the normal, like if it happened quickly, that would be
yeah,
extreme, but that would be
well,
the normal.
I should say that would be normal, but what we experience like inside of a month or two, that would be extreme, right? So
That was
we
insane.
actually,
That was like, yeah.
right? We just saw that over the last month. It went from like high 300s up to 5 something, back down to 3 to just under 400. That was like $150 move. So the volatility is still very present, right?
Yeah, and so wow, you asked really good questions. And so now when we talk about lumber, like you guys also sell panel, like you sell plywood and OSB, right? Okay.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So that's really a different animal. Now the thing is, you can't build a house. You need 3 things to build a house: dimension lumber, like 2x4, whether it's Western spruce, Eastern spruce, Southern pine, Douglas fir, stud, and some kind of panel. either plywood or OSB. So it's critical. The thing is that there are fewer facilities making plywood and OSB, and there are fewer companies. And a lot of those companies are not publicly traded. So there's a different mentality in terms of like having to worry about shareholders or really releasing information publicly about what is they're doing operating, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and the other thing is that plywood especially is used for a lot of other stuff besides home building. It's used for concrete forming, it's used for boarding up windows in advance of storms, and it's used for re-roofing after storms. So it does rely on the housing market, but it also has other things that impact it. And we've seen in the past 3 months a really leveling off of those prices. So they also went insane when the lumber prices went insane. But now, while the, like what you're explaining, where the lumber prices like really dropped a lot and then they went up and down as people were trying to figure out, you know, what is the price, the plywood and OSB prices flattened out in the past couple 3 months. And so, so I take that as a bit of a foreshadowing that as spring comes on, the lumber prices also, like as the mills finish their curtailments and as the housing really gets moving, and we have what I'm expecting to be quite a short building season this year, like just a bit of a spurt and then another slowdown, not the full year going crazy as we had in 2020, 2021. So the reason that the volatility like that is not something that either the industry or the customer wants is because how can you plan? Like you're a home builder. That's what happened with all those people that got caught when the price skyrocketed so quickly in 2020 and 2021, because they hadn't built into their agreements with their customers that depending on the change of the price of the wood. And so small contractors really got sort of messed up because between the 6 months when they had made their bid and it came time and they went to buy the wood and it was 3 times as expensive. So now they build into their contract depending on the price. And that's a lot of contingencies, like nobody can plan. So it's not like being able to say, okay, housing starts is this, interest rates are this, exchange rate is this, the price is going to change by like 5 or 6%. I'm going to say in a week or two, and I'm going to make my plan. So that's kind of where I think we're just starting to come on to now with all the changes that we had and the ability of people to see what is the situation now and how am I going to move forward in the next few months.
And that's so difficult with the volatility the way it is. But you're right about the plywood. Like I noticed the plywood, I mean, it dropped. I mean, it was like I was selling half inch CDX for, well, you know, you can have it priced at $80 a sheet, but we weren't selling a lot at $80 a sheet, you know. But right now we have it at $25 a sheet, and yeah, I mean, this is a very, well, it's not normal, but it's a much better price than the $80. Talking with some of the buyers,
that's a premium. That CDX is a premium wood too. Like
yeah, I mean, well,
like
we also
standard,
have the OSB, but it's not nearly as popular, and you know, like in our area, especially wintertime, it's like, you know, because of the water sensitivity of it and stuff. But just kind of like some anecdotal stuff here. Because I noticed the plywood prices has stabilized and, you know, we're doing good. But I'm talking with some of the buyers and they're telling me that there's a little bit of an issue starting to take place where they're starting to see the plywood prices start to tick up, and, you know, not major or anything, but it's certainly to the point that it's making them aware of it. Do you know anything about that? Like, have you heard about like the plywood inventory levels, anything kind of critical happening there? You know, one of the stories that I had covered back in 2019, and I think it was November, I had done a report where OSB manufacturers were pulling 1 billion square feet of production off the market right before 2020 kicked in. I don't think that ever came back, right? I mean, that I don't know if it ever did. I mean, I might have missed it, but I don't know if that production ever came back online like it did.
Right. And so there's a few things, and I think we talked a little bit in one of our videos that I did with you about the carbon credits, like the other side of the ledger. So the plywood and OSB, like the panel mill companies, they also, and a lot of the dimension lumber, especially in the US, they have their holdings of their timberland. So if there's an issue with sourcing the logs, or if they can defer harvest and get credit for the carbon offset, they might decide. It's things are getting a lot more complicated than they used to be. So now that is a big deal, because you can't just be like, oh, I'm not going to harvest for a year, and then you have to commit. Well, it's a minimum of 10 years. So you have to, and it has to be timber that would have been in the harvest basket at some point. It can't be a bunch of wood that you were never going to harvest ever. Okay. So what I'm going to say is, probably there was, when things were still slow there until the end of 2019, that might have been the thought of some of those companies, like I said, that are privately held. They're investment firms, and they're not like guys with sawdust in their hair, like what we were talking to, you know what I'm saying, right? But they're still manufacturers, and their core business is still making the product. So if they have an issue with some of their supply, they're going to locate logs. They'll build a new mill somewhere. And then we did have last year, surprisingly, quite a few mills reopening, or new mills being built in different parts of the US and Canada. So the immediate picture, I would say, is that there's not a concern about actual supply of plywood and OSB. And the forecast that I got from the other folks on my panel when I was speaking at the National Association of Home Builders just now in Vegas, the projection from the realtors and the housing is that this year is going to be okay, not that great, but next year, 2024, should be, because the macroeconomic cycle is going to come back for housing to be on an uptick again, plus all of that pent-up demand from people who stepped back over the past few months and most of this year. So pretty much I think everyone is ready to come back online, hasn't done it yet, but is looking toward the longer term future to be able to serve that expected new demand.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm kind of anticipating that as well. Like, I think right now, I mean, at least in my opinion, I can't imagine anybody being very certain on anything right now, and so like the uncertainty level is probably just quite extreme throughout the entire industry. I want to hear a little bit more about the National Association of Home Builders. Tell me a little bit more about that event that you had attended to. What was some of the insights that you could take away from that?
Right. And so it's a really good event because it is the actual like construction, or folks who are have their business serving construction or somehow related. And, it has two parts. It has speeches and presentations like what I did, and then the trade show floor. So like, for example, in my own interest, there's sawmills are there, and there's an entire section that just does like kitchen and bath. So people who make countertops or do, fixtures and all that kind of stuff. And it brings everyone together, and it's huge. I mean, I was at the one in the beginning of 2020, just before all the COVID stuff, and it was 60,000 people.
Wow.
This year was more than 100,000. Like,
holy moly.
It actually blew their capacity. They blew, it was a little bit, whoa, like it was kind of nuts. So there's an appetite.
Yeah.
And information or connections are at a premium, and everybody wants to know what's happening, and to make their own business, if they're either a consumer or a provider, to see what they think. And just like what we're talking about, like, we can tell you the data for last year and what's happening right now and what I think. We don't know what's going to happen this year until this year happens. The fact that attendance was so insane really lets you know that there's no sort of real extended downturn coming with the way that we had after the US housing crash of 2006 and then the economic crash of 2008. The volatility is, no one likes the volatility. Everybody prefers some kind of certainty, but the sort of overview picture is that we're business is going to be going.
That's very interesting to kind of think, from 60,000 people to 100,000. I mean, that's a significant increase in the amount of people attending. But I think what you're kind of getting at there, this is the National Association of Home Builders. Home builders need to build homes in order to make money, right? This is their job. Like, this is their product that they need to do. And right now, it's a little nervous, right? People are very nervous. But when you think about it, 100,000 people attending, going from 60 to 100, that's people who are eager. That's people who really want to know what it is that they need to do, or the information in order to conduct their business. And they're getting ready, right? I mean, this is eagerness that's happening. It's not them going, hey, I'm backing away. It's them figuring out what it is they need to move forward here. So
yeah, I mean,
that's
it's
a
people with
pent up.
like people with skin in the game, right? It's not like viewers, it's not like analysts like me, it's not like a bank or somebody that gives you information or just is a viewer. These are like actual people who that's what they do. So they want to know, and they want to either sell their product or find customers or find suppliers or get the information, like, or all of these things, right? Like for me, both. When I'm there, I'm providing information, I'm getting information, and then I'm getting connections, right? So even the organizers were surprised how much.
Wow.
Like it was
How
just
much?
it was wild. It was absolute, and a good thing it was in Vegas, because like at least Vegas is able to take, like able to expand to take all these people. But it was nuts. Like it was just crazy, and they think it's going to
Right.
stay like that. They think that next year, like they're expecting a lot now.
Yeah. So this year may not be the year, right? But you're thinking next year. Is this kind of like the theme of it? It's like this year is the year of kind of getting prepared to kind of get the idea of what's happening, but it's 2024 that's going to be the year that things really start to, what does it move, start to heat up, start to get better? What do you think is like, what is your envision there happening?
Well, that's what the realtors are saying, right? And they were saying that even last year. So the people who track the real estate data and what's going on there, because of the mortgages, like that's the first, the actual home selling is the first hit, and then the home building, and then the lumber pricing, right? So even last year, the realtors were expecting not this year, but next year, like 2024. And what I'm saying is there's enough sort of a demand lingering, and like you're saying, like the eagerness, that I expect like a shorter bump to home building during the good weather, and then another cooling off. And supposedly interest rates are going to start going back down. Like they're going to go up a little bit more, and then they're going to start going back down. So that, and when the projections for the housing market are a little bit sort of like not easy, but predictable because of the demographic and because of the macroeconomic. So the sawmills look at what is going to happen with housing 6 quarters in advance. So 1.5 years from now, the sawmills are like, okay, we're in the up and down cycle. Like what we said, 2018 was a good year. 2019 was not such a good year, but as 2019 was ending, it looked like things were getting better. And the data that came out at the beginning of 2020, we knew it was going to be a good home building year. And then the COVID thing, and it just went nuts. Like it just went wild, right? So the changes to all of these metrics by like the Fed and the Treasury and all that stuff is trying to dampen down that overenthusiasm that everybody was getting into being in the housing market, to not have another bubble and crash. And the combination of that, and then the demographics of the age of the single largest cohort of first-time home buyer right now is millennials. And we're just at the beginning years of those people getting into their 30s and becoming home buyers. And so that's why we can say just the fact of how many people are becoming like home buying and starting to have kids age, we know that next year and into 2026 and probably another few years after that, there still will be an increase in the amount of demand for homes. And just real quick, the stock of existing homes is aging. I think I mentioned that to you last time. There is a significant amount of actual majority of existing homes that are into the 70, 80 years, getting to the end of their life. So they're going to need either knock down and rebuild or complete reconstruction. And that's all lumber. That's also lumber demand.
Yeah, that's something I don't think a lot of people really take into consideration, is that aging, like, because a lot of homes got built all at the same time in the country, like, or a good over a course of a few decades.
A lot, yeah.
And yeah, those things are going to be coming to a point where they're just simply outdated, in a lot of ways too. I mean, whether the home is just not capable of just standing from the deterioration of it, but in the inefficiencies of it. I mean, the homes are built so much more efficient nowadays. So I guess that probably covers a pretty good idea on the new construction. Let's kind of circle back a little bit back into the lumber thing again, and talk about, like, because a lot of people, when they talk about like lumber and the issues with lumber, we talk a lot about the tariffs and duties and stuff like that go from like Canada to the United States, and there's always like this argument on that. Kind of explain a little bit about this thing. Kind of help us out, like, what is this? Because it goes back forever, and everybody kind of talks about it,
Yeah.
but it's
It
really
does.
understandable. So
It does. It does go back to forever, and it really sort of became what we understand it to be now in the 80s. So we're in softwood lumber dispute number 5. Dispute number 5. Right now, yeah. So it's like dispute, settlement, maybe agreement, dispute, settlement, dispute.
Like Rocky movies,
So I'll just hit you with some numbers real quick.
Okay.
Almost 50% of all wood manufactured in Canada is made in British Columbia.
Oh, say that again. How much?
Almost 50%.
50% of Canadian lumber comes out of British Columbia?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then Quebec is next. And then Alberta, Ontario, right? So in the past, 85% of Canadian wood was shipped to the US. Because of the duty that Canada diversified so that we can send more wood offshore, that is now closer to 65%. Okay.
This for somebody, maybe some of our younger viewers, what's a duty?
Oh, the duty is a tariff, like as you said. So the basic concept is that the argument is that Canadian industry is unfair because supposedly it's subsidized. What it comes down to is the fact that the timber is owned by the public. Okay, so the vast majority of all forests in Canada is called Crown land. It's owned by Canadians and it's managed by the province. So each province sets its timber supply agreements and what we call stumpage, the price of the timber. In the US, in Europe, Germany, in Japan, the timberland is owned privately and is sold to the market. Okay, so the claim is that the government helps the sawmills by whatever with the stumpage price in terms of the logs, and which means that Canadian lumber coming into the US, like, that's a disadvantage to the US sawmills. We could talk about that. Entire books have been, like, multiple books have been written about the duty. Basically, the Canadian perspective is, I mean, it's a fact that the US industry would prefer if Canada just exported the logs. That's kind of what the whole point of the pressure is. Why should Canada have sawmills when there's not enough people in Canada to consume all the trees to make lumber? So the logs should be sent to the US, and the US would make lumber for the US. Okay, but Canada's not going to do that because, or just raping your countryside for raw material is not that's just not, we're not a third world country, right? So back to the numbers. So until recently, about 85% of all Canadian wood was sent into the US. And then because of the duty, that is now reduced to like 65%. Because the Canadians, when I tell you the price, when that wood crosses the border to the US, the Canadians have to pay whatever the amount of the duty is on that wood before it can cross the border. But they don't get, that's not in the sell price. That's after. So it's a constraint, right? If you look at it another way, approximately 35% of all wood in the US comes from Canada. Okay, there's a little bit more lumber manufacturing in the US than there is in Canada, but it's still not enough.
35% of the wood here in the United States that we use comes from Canada?
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay.
I knew it was a lot. I didn't know it was that much. My goodness.
Yeah. And
And
that
so, like, coming
that
out of British Columbia, that's like
17%.
huge amount. Okay, go ahead. I'm
Right?
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
No, but I mean, exactly. And so when we had what we were calling the atmospheric river, like all that flooding that we had at the end of 2021, and it absolutely prevented the mills in the supply basket of British Columbia from shipping because it took out the highways and the railway line. That 17% was enough for the price of all wood to go back up at the end of 2021, right?
Mhm.
Things were slowing down. Like everybody was like, I'm not paying $1,600 for two by fours, right? Then so much volume because BC was basically down for more than 3 months. People had to buy their wood from elsewhere, and so that was the reason why the price raised. Sometimes the price goes up because of demand. Sometimes the price goes up because of supply side issue. And when it's something so huge in the part of the continent that's critical for the entire continent, because BC wood goes to Nova Scotia, goes to Florida, goes to, right? As does other, like all the wood moves. That's why when I say like my price is North America price, when I quote a Western spruce 2x4, it doesn't matter if you live in Prince George beside the mill, or if you're in Florida, or if you're in, that's the price. You're obviously going to be paying more for the transportation and for other things, right? But the price of the wood is the price of the wood. There's no regionality to that.
And so, let's talk a little bit more about this softwood agreement. So there's another change coming, right? This is the 5th one, you're saying? And so
dispute. We're not in an agreement. We're in a dispute.
Oh, dispute. Yeah, I shouldn't say agreement. I should, right?
No.
It's not,
We
yeah,
did
we're
have.
not agreeing on anything, are we?
No, we're not in it. We're in a dispute. We did have an agreement. We had like an agreement in the 80s, and then we had the 2006 agreement. So that provided some certainty, because the mills knew, like, if I send X amount of wood across the border, whatever the price is, I'm going to be paying 17% or whatever it was, like additionally, to be allowed to send wood into the US, right? So now we're in a dispute, and what happens over the course of that is there's an administrative review, and the US Department of Commerce makes the Canadian mills fill out all these forms about the wood that they sold, the volume, and the price. So it takes a year for that data to get collected, and then it takes a year to be understood. And then they come out with the duty went up or the duty went down. And so there's a huge lag when the prices go up and down. And so the duty that we've had for this dispute, number 5, ranged from between 25% to 7%, depending on what the price of lumber and how much wood had been sold in the year and a half or 2 years previously. This dispute is lasting longer than previously. And because the initial request from the US Lumber Coalition that was accepted, like people always say, oh, whichever president you have slapped a duty. It's not the president, and it's not the White House, and it doesn't matter which party. This is a administrative between the Commerce Department and the interest group asking for the duty. Okay, and so in all of those 5 disputes that we've had, I've been saying that we're in dispute number 5, and all the 4 disputes that we've had, they start negotiating a settlement when the amount collected gets to $5 billion. That's a fact.
Okay.
Like,
so say that again. So
is it about
kind of understand that?
when? So because they're collecting duties over the course, like let's say 5 years. Let's say the duty's been going. Pick a decade. Let's say the duty's been being collected for 5 years, and when the amount that the Commerce Department has gets to be 5 billion, that's when they start negotiating for a settlement. The settlements, because in the legal platform of NAFTA or WTO and the new NAFTA, Canada tended to win. So the settlements was money being returned to Canada, but a portion of it staying in the US, getting distributed among the members of the US Lumber Coalition, who are sawmills and who are also timberland owners. Okay. And then the money that comes back to Canada is not allowed to be distributed back to the sawmills. They are absolutely not allowed to return any of that money to those who paid it. So Canada uses it for research and development. Canada uses it to advanced material, which we talked a little bit about last time, the cross-laminated, the LVL, all these veneers, biomass fuel, pellets, and marketing to ship Canadian wood offshore. Okay, so I heard in summer of last year that the amount collected was 5.65 billion, which would say to me that they should be negotiating for a settlement. Well, now it's almost been a year. Some sources and I were talking about it must be well above 6 billion at this point. And a little birdie told me, and I'm trying to confirm this, that there is maybe a conversation between Canada and US for a new agreement, a new softwood lumber agreement, which would still include some kind of penalty on the Canadians, but it wouldn't be all over the place. And it wouldn't be launched in a legal battle. It would be purely administrative, like we know what the duty is, we know when we're paying it, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Very interesting stuff. That is probably one of the most confusing things to try and understand about the lumber market and lumber industry, is to try and understand this, because there's so much volume that comes out of Canada, and there is so much, that dispute and like differences that happen within it, that it's very difficult to try and understand, like, why it is that this occurs, or what the volume should be, or what the prices should be, and stuff like that.
I'll just tell you that.
Go ahead.
Tell you that when we had the 2006 softwood lumber agreement, because they had to battle it out, right? And a couple of years later, the list of the lawyers, the law firms involved, was released. There was more paid in lawyers than there was collected in the duty. Like, whoa. Right?
Isn't that like?
You see what I'm saying? Like, it's kind of like, why are we doing this? So at some point, Canada's a small country. Like, if we're paying $2.5 billion in lawyers, that lawyer fee was divided in half. The US paid 2, and we paid, is more than what the stupid thing that they're arguing about.
That's,
right?
that's
how I look. Oh my God.
That's government.
I just look at it like, oh my God, please, like, stop, right? Anyway, sorry, what were you gonna?
I'm just trying to wrap my head around that. Okay. I know, like, predictions are difficult, but right now we're low. Lumber's low. Is it going to stay low for a while? Or you think it's going to, I know we got some, the next year is going to be a little bit of an issue trying to figure things out, and then after that it might start popping up. But are we in a low now? Can it go lower? To me it seems like this is like a low. This is like the bottom area.
I think so. I think this is I think it's struggling toward the new bottom. And I think if I were to make a prediction, which I don't really do that, I would say I would expect it to be leveling off through this year, kind of around where we are now. Now, again, if there's a wildfire, if there's some other storm, or if there's a labor dispute. Okay, so let me just give you an example. Weyerhaeuser had a big strike in Oregon in November. They had 5 weeks that their mills were down. I can't remember how many mills they have. Let's say 6 mills in Oregon went offline completely. So during the ending of last year, when all the other prices were dropping, as we're talking about, Douglas fir went up, because all those mills in Oregon capacity was taken offline. Then when those mills came back, it stayed up a little bit, and then it kind of went back down, and it was not moving in tandem with the other 2x4 prices that usually all move together, and then now it's caught up. So I don't really make, for that reason, I don't make predictions, because like I don't know. We've got two big railway unions right now that are in negotiation in the U.S. for Canada for the next contract.
Right.
So really hoping for no disruption of that magnitude that would change what I would say, right? But I would think where we are now, even though it seems high if you compare it to 10 years ago, is like the new bottom. I would think that we'll be, generally speaking, level to where we are right now through this year, with some bumps upward when the real spring building season comes on, let's say May, but short-lived.
Okay.
And then next year, and I'll tell you about next year later this year.
Okay. Yeah. Let's try to figure out what's happening this year. But
Yeah.
and I kind of feel the same way. You know, I mean, a lot of people ask me, you know, is this now is a good time to buy lumber? I think so. Like, I mean, if you have a project here that's coming up in the next few months, I wouldn't hesitate on buying lumber at this price. But trying to plan a project for maybe, you know, 2024 or something like that, it's going to be a much different story than what you're going to
But all costs are going to go up. Like if someone's planning a project, what they're going to get is going to go up too, because we're having the slowdown of the housing right now, right? So this time last year, when somebody asked me, should I buy wood now? I said, oh, baby, you should have bought it 2 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but this year, I'm saying, yeah, it's. Right. I don't really expect it to go down any further now, because we're going to print down tomorrow quite a bit actually on benchmark 2x4s. So there's room to come up, but I don't really see why it would start rising too fast for very long.
Yeah. And I'm in agreement with that. I mean, just from the things that I'm feeling and seeing and hearing and talking with, it's just, you know, the overall tone of it just seems to be that way. Like, this is our low. If we do get a spike, it's probably not going to be incredibly high. I just don't see a lot of people into the game right now. But yeah, as far as the following year, yeah, I'm really kind of curious to see what the Federal Reserve does with the interest rates. And I think that's going to have a lot to determine on where people's motivation comes, you know. Keta, thank you so much for talking with me. Is there anything else you'd like to join in on, or anything else that you'd like to? You know, we talk about all kinds of stuff. I mean,
yeah. For your viewers, I think it's really important to point out the difference between like the prices that you have in your shop, the retail prices versus the prices that I talk about. So the prices that I talk about are the prices that your buyer at your store pays. That's the difference, right? I don't know if you want to talk about like the futures and everything.
Yeah,
but
let's go ahead and let's kind of explain that a little bit to people. So when they're looking at, you know, when they fire up the news and they look at the futures price and they're like, oh, look, lumber's down, I'm going to run down to the lumber yard and pick some up. It doesn't work like that, right? So
no.
Let us kind of explain how it does work.
So futures is like publicly available as you see, and it's the future, right? So currently right now it's the March contract, which expires March 15th, but almost all the trades are happening in May, right? If you look, when you're looking at futures, don't just look at what the price is, look at how much volume it is. Okay, so if there's 230 people trading on March 15th for whatever price it says, and there's 2,000 people trading for May, that's where you're looking at what is the price. Okay, and on futures, it's a hedge. Okay, futures is what players, whether they're lumber buyers or sellers, use in case the price moves in the opposite direction of what they thought when they were making their purchases. Okay. Almost never does anyone take delivery on futures. So a sawmill will have like their 40 rail cars or whatever that they have, and they roll over as the next contract, like May, then July, then September, etc. Okay. What I do is called cash or print. So that's the price, like the price of the wood. That's actual price of wood being sold. on a
Right.
wholesaler, a producer or wholesaler level.
Right. Now, I mean, obviously it doesn't work like this, but if you could kind of imagine, just for the viewers, like if you bought a futures contract, that may be a delivery for 2 months from today, but print or cash is
Is
as if you
it,
went to the mill and bought it today, like showed
yeah.
up at the mill, paid them, and they loaded you up. That's what the price is. It
Well,
doesn't quite work like that, but that's kind of a way of
it's
understanding it.
the price that we print is the price that the mills are selling for now, whether it's in 2 weeks, in 5 weeks, or in 3 days, depending on what their order file is, right? But yeah, that's the price of the wood right now. So that's what I mean about how when things get really hot, and a sawmill order file might be out to 5 or 6 weeks, they will what's called go off the market. So they're not going to quote you a price after 6 weeks, because they don't know what the price is going to be in 6 weeks. Nobody knows what the price is going to be in 6 weeks. Plywood and OSB mills go off the market a lot more easily. Like plywood and OSB mills are like, I got what you want. There's not that many people you can get it from. I don't like what's going on, so I'm just not going to quote you and like take it or leave it kind of thing, right? But there's so many dimension lumber mills, so many companies, and a lot of them are publicly traded, so they have to answer to their shareholders. They can't just be like, I want the price to be, X, so I'm not going to sell any wood until the price goes to be X. Like that would cause problem, right? So when the negotiations are happening during the times of year when building is more or less, sometimes the mill has all the power and sometimes the customer has all the power. Okay. And the customer might be like, you know what? I don't need the wood right now. And I have, a bid for X on futures that's going to come up in a couple of weeks. So maybe I'll call you back after that. And then maybe that they might be sad that they did that, or maybe that might work out for them. It's very complicated. So futures is part of it, but it's not really about selling actual wood.
Right. It's more about hedging.
Yeah.
That's really what it's about. Just kind of curious. This is something that I've always kind of curious about, because maybe it's just because I'm not in the game. But these order files, right? When a mill has order files stretching out like 4 weeks, 5 weeks or something, and then say there's like a change, can those order files all of a sudden disappear? Can like the orders get canceled and all of a sudden it goes from 5 weeks to 2 weeks?
Well, it doesn't.
I mean, it may not be that extreme, but yeah.
It doesn't often get canceled. Like the thing is, for these kind of negotiations that we're talking about, there's a relationship. Like it's not like somebody doesn't know you and they're calling. When someone wants to become a customer of a mill or of a large wholesaler or a reload, they have to provide a letter of credit. They have to give a certain amount. Like there's a relationship there. So it doesn't really happen so much that an order will get canceled, but it does happen that a sawmill order file can disappear quickly, because
like
everybody,
the orders go out and then there's nothing else.
yeah, like everybody. Okay, so again, like someone's making their plan. So let's say now at this time of year, the beginning of March, and they're like, okay, I'm going to be, I have 6 houses that I'm going to build in June. So now they're going to order, and the price is going to go up. The order file is going to stretch out. That wood's going to get made. It's going to get sent. He's got it. He's not calling back. He might call back in September, right? So the when we do our market survey, we ask about inventory.
Mm-hmm.
So when we had that situation with the storms here in BC at the end of 2021, or even before that, when the price went to $1,600 and people were taking videos of a mill yard, and they're like, look at all this wood. Like they're holding all this wood. What are these guys doing? The government should get involved. That wood was all sold. It was waiting to go out. So here in BC,
I feel bad because I was actually one of those people who did that, but I wasn't trying to say, hey, they're holding. I was just saying there's still plenty of wood in the system, guys. It's here. It's just not getting, right.
It depends.
But,
yeah, it depends. Is it actually on the rail? Is it going to the rail? Is it on the truck? Do you know where your truck is? During that time, 2020 and 2021, so many people were spending so much time just trying to find where their wood is. They weren't building, they weren't making wood, they weren't selling. They were trying to administratively find out, why is the wood not there? It used to take 6 weeks. Now it's been 3 months and we don't even know, like, where is it, right? So when the the things that are important to look at, and we do report on that in the for the customers, and I put a little bit of it on the website and talk to you about, is lock supply. So how quickly can I respond if I need to go up or down? Inventory in the yard, inventory at the customer. How much wood does the wholesaler have? If the wholesaler thinks Buddy's not going to call me back again because he just got his wood for June, why would I order more wood from the mill? Right. So where for 3 weeks everybody was ordering and the mill order file went out to 5 weeks and the price went up, and then after those 5 weeks, that's all arriving to the customer, and the order file is shrinking, and inventory is everywhere, then the price doesn't go up. It probably goes down. And that's what I mean about this year. I think it's going to be a short building season, because that's what I think is going to happen. I think the mills are ready, but not over. And as this winter weather that seems to be never ending finally eases, burst of building, and then by June, July, August, not so much anymore. And then things slow down again for real.
Nice. Yeah. Going to be an interesting time. This next year is going to be a very interesting one for the lumber industry, I think. I mean, not exciting, like, you know, as far as like watching these lumber prices get all volatile and stuff, but I think it's just going to be really interesting to watch how the home builders play out, how the mills, how they handle the reaction to it. And then after this year, man, it's going to be like game on almost, you know?
I think next year is going to be game on, and this year is going to be a lot of study. I think a lot of consultants and a lot of analysts are going to get hired to figure out. You can't look at the previous 10 years, how we used to do it, and you can't really look at those last 2 years either, because that's not going to happen again either. So what do you have to go by? Like this January? How can you can't plan a year based on a month. So yeah, this year is going to be data gathering, analysis, seeing what, you know, really hoping that no crazy storm or things like that happen again. And then by, you know, the end of this year, knowing a little bit more, like what we're saying, probably we've got the price bottom. We know what the level, like where the sort of economics of it are playing out. And then launching into 2024, where from what I'm hearing from the home builders and the realtors, should be like a multi-year, like they're talking about like into 2030.
Wow.
That's what they said.
Like, this is like, it's going to be a game on.
But not like 2.5 million starts like we had back in 05, or not stupidly, but a good level, like a nice level of consistent home building, ongoing activity, consistent demand for the lumber, prices at something that people can see, understand, plan for. And yeah, like when you say game on, to me, game on means a mill ran at its optimal capacity level, which in Canada is above 95%, above 90%, where we haven't even been above 80 in the last couple of years. Okay. But we have to find out about the trees. Like everything changed so much. So it's a really interesting time right now.
Yeah. I know. And it's just like, it's everybody wants those simple answers to it. And we just went on for an hour here, and still, like, I'm sure we could probably go on for another hour talking about all the little details of it.
Well, we'll do another one in a few months.
Let's definitely do it. Keta, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today.
No worries.
You know, let's give Madison Lumber Reporter a shout out. And then also, how else? I mean, I'm going to put the YouTube there. I'm going to put the website. Is there? I mean, that's pretty much the two major places that we can go to find your information. And
they can contact me. Yeah. Like my contact info was there. I have competition, so you know they're really big compared to us. They would never do this kind of thing to reach out to people, and we're, you know, as the advantage for being small is customer service. So I'm there, you know, my programmer, I can phone him and we can do things on the dashboard. If something goes down, if there's something happens with the system, we're very responsive. And yeah, my YouTube, but the website really is where everything is. And then contacting, just get in touch, fill out an order form, fill out a request for a sample, see what the full list of the prices, the 500 individual softwood lumber and panel, and the commentary, and make your decision. It's good information, and someone who's in the business or knows about it would be able to discern for themselves, the quality is there.
Yeah. And this information isn't something that you can just like, fire up to a computer and just get. I mean, this is like hands-on contact with lots of people. And, unless you want to sit around and just start calling people up to figure it out, Madison's Lumber Reporter has done all that information. And
well, they're not going to, that's the thing, is that they're not going
to give you the info, right?
They're not going to tell. It's like my like value is my sources. And that's something that we nurture, like my competition, everybody who's in this kind of work where they're doing price reporting, your sources are like your bread and butter, right?
Yeah.
So the like people who just need to have an idea of the trend can just go on my website, because we do post like the small amount, the few benchmark items. People who really need to know the guts of it, that's the kind of people who are our customers. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And like even me myself, like, I mean, I have access to some of my vendors, but that's all I have access to.
Yeah.
So it's like a portion of what you have, but what you have is a million times bigger.
That's exactly the thing, is like, let's say you're a mill. Okay, so you know what your price of your like Southern Pine 2x4s or whatever, but you don't know what everybody else is doing. Mm-hmm. That's the thing, right? Like people talk to me about some kind of very custom proprietary product that only comes out of a certain part of the continent, or like hardwoods. We don't do hardwood, we do softwood. Hardwoods are very regional, right? For the data that we do, you have to do the entire continent. You have to talk to everybody and cover everything, and then publish everything. If you just do one piece of it, exactly, someone else could do that, right? So it's, and like I said, I have an analyst, so we spend all of Thursday. Thursday's our big day, getting all the data and then processing it and having it put through the system into the dashboard that the customers will be looking at like overnight tonight or tomorrow morning usually, or Monday morning often, and then next week again.
And then we do it all over again. Thank you, Keta.
Okay, thanks, Simon. We'll talk again. Thank you so much. Always fun. It's always fun.
Absolutely. Uneducated Economist, you let me know.